Thank you, everyone, for joining us. My name is Marianne Mahoney, and I am Professor of History and Director of the Latin American, Latino, and Caribbean Center at CCSU. We are extraordinarily happy to welcome this evening two guests to the university to help us celebrate Hispanic Heritage Month. They are Dr. Antonio Curet of the Smithsonian and Representative Edwin Vargas of the Connecticut State Legislature. Let me introduce them briefly, and then I'm going to turn the floor over to Dr. Curet, but I'll be handling the PowerPoint. And in advance, we ask your indulgence with the challenges of technology. So, Antonio Curet is a curator of the National Museum of the American Indian. He was born in Hato Rey, Puerto Rico in 1960 and attended the University of Puerto Rico, Rio Piedras, where he obtained his BA and MA in chemistry. Curet received his Ph.D. in 1992 at Arizona State University. He was part of the faculty at Gettysburg College from 1993 to 1996, and of the University of Colorado at Denver faculty from 1996 to 2000. From 2000 to 2013, he was curator at the Field Museum and adjunct professor at the University of Illinois at Chicago. I forgot to turn the recorder on, so here we go.
I have it on.
All right, thank you.
Welcome.
His research focuses on cultural and social change in the ancient Caribbean, but he has participated also in archaeological projects in Arizona, Puerto Rico, and Veracruz, Mexico. He has directed several projects, including Excavation, La Galera, Ceiba, Puerto Rico, and the archaeological project of the Valley of Maunabo. Since 1995, he has been conducting excavations at the Ceremonial Center of Tibes in Ponce, Puerto Rico. And in 2013, he began co-directing a regional project in the Valley of Añasco in western Puerto Rico. Curet has published multiple articles in national and international journals, a book on Caribbean paleodemography, and has edited volumes on Cuban archaeology, the archaeology of Tibes, Puerto Rico, and long-distance interaction in the Caribbean. He is also on the editorial boards of the Journal for Caribbean Archaeology, Revista Arqueológica del Área Intermedia and Latin American Antiquity, Antípoda of the Universidad de los Andes in Colombia, and he is the editor of Caribbean Archaeology and of the Caribbean Archaeology and Ethnohistory book series of the University of Alabama Press. Welcome, Dr. Curet. And let me say, my students really enjoyed our conversation with you this afternoon.
So did I.
Oh, wonderful. Let me just introduce Representative Vargas now, and then we'll go back to Dr. Curet. Representative Edwin Vargas was born in Brooklyn, New York, of Puerto Rican parents. He was an undergraduate at the University of Puerto Rico and the University of Hartford, graduating from the latter with a Bachelor of Science in Education, where he was also subsequently awarded a master's degree in public administration. He was a teacher in the Hartford Public Schools for 35 years, during which he served as leader of the Hartford Federation of Teachers in many roles, including the presidency. He has also held numerous leadership roles at the local, state, and national levels in labor, political, and civil rights organizations. Ed is currently serving in his fourth term as a legislator in the Connecticut House of Representatives. So welcome, Ed, and thank you very much for joining us this evening.
Thank you, Marianne.
The title of Dr. Curet's talk, if I can get my phone open again, is Life, Death, and Remembering. Life, Death, and Remembering in the Center of the Cosmos, a preliminary interpretation of the Ceremonial Center of Tibes, Puerto Rico. And if I could ask everyone, including myself, to mute themselves so that, dogs, chickens, the pouring rain, thunder and lightning,
cells,
various other things don't come crashing in on us. We would appreciate it because we are recording this because there are a lot of people who are unable to attend. Thank you. I'm going to turn mine off, and I'm going to turn off the camera. Antonio, if you need anything, just holler.
Can you hear me?
Yes.
Okay, great. Well, thank you very much for this introduction. And before I start, I want to thank a group of people that have made possible for me to be here, starting with, of course, Marianne Mahody, director of the Latin American, Latino, and Caribbean Center, Mildred Guzman-Young, university assistant, Dr. Jessica Rutherford, from the Events Committee chair, Lara Whitmore from the Student Center, and especially also to the president of the university, Zulma Toro, and finally, but not least, Representative Edwin Vargas, for being here and being part of this event. I'm really excited, and and you can ask Marianne. I enjoyed a lot in my conversation with the students today, this afternoon, and I'm very, very happy to be here. Marianne, can we have the first slide?
Okay, it will take a minute for it to come up.
Okay. I don't know. When Europeans arrived in the Caribbean, they found, especially in the Greater Antilles, they found that groups that were organized on what we call today chiefdoms or cacicazgos, using the terminology from the indigenous language at that time. Can you? Okay, there we go. Great. Yeah. Okay. Okay. First slide. Go one more slide. So there. Yeah. So they came mainly. It was the Spanish that came first, of course, and they landed in several parts of the northern Caribbean, especially Bahamas, Cuba. Eventually, they came back and also colonized Dominican Republic or Hispaniola and Puerto Rico. And they found that some of these groups were organized in stratified societies that we call cacicazgos, or in anthropology in general, chiefdoms. Next slide. In that encounter, they exchanged many things, and the Spanish called this kind of social organization kingdoms. They call him this word like petit kings, not like the king of Spain, but they were calling him king. And since then, anthropology, archaeology, and history, or historians, archaeologists, and anthropologists, kind of classify the Caribbean ancient societies as chiefdoms. Everybody were organizing that. Everybody, there were multiple chiefs that controlled certain territory and had control over the people that lived in those territories. Next one. Okay, no, I'm sorry. Go back 1 minute. Sorry, I forgot that one. Okay. My research deals mostly with this topic, but since there are a lot of people here that don't know that much about the Caribbean and even less about less about the archaeology of the Caribbean, I'm going to give you it's a really short ancient history of Puerto Rico, so you have an idea of what's going on in Puerto Rico, and when I talk about my project, you can see. What? Can you hear me? Hello?
Yes, we can hear you. Ed, would you mute yourself, please?
I thought I was muted.
Oh, okay. I thought I did something wrong. But anyway, so I'm going to start with a short history of or ancient history of the Caribbean. Then I'm going to be talking about my project, and I'm going to show you more than what you need to understand the main topic of this talk. But I am doing it more also for the students, so they can see different kind of methods that we use, the ethics behind excavations, and all the not all, but many of the details we have to deal with when we excavate. So I'm trying to do a combination of things here. The idea here is that the project that I'm doing in the Ceremonial Center of Tibes was looking for the chief, basically. We were seeing this is the earliest ceremonial center of the Caribbean, and everybody tends to agree that it was probably the seat of one of the earliest forms of chiefdoms or social stratification. So I chose Tibes, or this site, to actually study this beginning of this stratification. But let me start with a little bit of history, and then we'll get back to the project, and then we'll talk about the interpretation of the data that we collected. Next one. Next slide. The earliest people that we know of that came to Puerto Rico was they landed probably around 2500 BC. We have that, and there's some tantalizing evidence that they might have been here before that. There were mostly fishers and hunters and gatherers. I have an impression that these were people that were navigators, they were mariners, they were moving from island to island, not just within one island. And most of the objects that we find tend to be stone tools. With some exceptions, we find sometimes shell tools, and very few times bone tools. This doesn't mean that they had a poor material culture, because over 75% of the materials that these people used, and actually people in the tropics in general, tends to be from basketry, clothes, different basically perishable materials. 75% of the material culture of the tropics tends to be perishable materials: wood, textiles, anything of that kind. So we miss, basically in archaeology, we're dealing with only 25% or less of the material culture of these people in order to understand who they were and what they did. There's different kind of stone tools here. From on top, we have cutting tools and an amulet made of shell on the left. On the right side, in the middle, on the bottom, they're basically grinders, different types of grinders. And then on the left, there's different kind of amulets or necklaces or pendants, I should say, that we found in different sites. They're not very common, these ones, actually. So they're the oldest ones are the ones that are on the top, with the shell amulet there. Next one. But then around 500 BC, we see these people coming from Venezuela, basically from close to Trinidad. They actually developed further inland, and they start coming down the Orinoco River until they hit the coast. And this took hundreds of years, of course. And eventually they start navigating to the islands. The interesting thing is that instead of, and they stopped first in Trinidad, but then the next earliest dates that we have in the Caribbean for these people are in Puerto Rico. So they went from Trinidad all the way to Puerto Rico and settled there. And these are basically villages. They had villages. They were farmers. We have evidence that they were farming, actually. And they made the best pottery in the whole ancient history of the Caribbean. It's funny, they're really early. They lasted between 500 BC to 600, more or less. And they still have the best pottery. If you have done pottery, or you know anything about pottery, many of these pots that you're seeing here are not, it's not that easy to make. It's actually, you have to be careful when you dry them and when you fire them. For example, the vessel with the conic pedestal on the bottom left corner, you can see that the bottom of the bowl is flat, and it's almost like a 90 degrees angle there between the wall and those are places where when you're drying it, if you dry it too quick, those pots will break. And also when you're firing, if you don't know how to fire those, they break easily. It's really hard. You have to be really good at and know what you're doing to make that kind of pot. And then if you add the craftsmanship that they needed for making those shapes, for painting them and decorating them the way that you're seeing here, these were master potters basically. And actually, at that time, some people think that these are one of the best pottery for South America, or at least most northern South America. They also had some different kind of amulets or pendants and figures. You can see on the right. Some of them are from shell, other ones are green stone, and other types of stones. These people, as I mentioned, they probably were farmers. The few houses that we have excavated seems that they lived in huge houses, probably where 40 or 60 people could fit. So that's a multi-family house. They live in villages, and it seems that many times they position the houses around a central clearing, like around a ring of houses, or a semicircular arrangements of the houses. And they're not completely like using a mold everywhere, but they follow certain patterns. You can see that they have some canons on what a village should look, at that point. It seems that they were egalitarian societies. Many people tend to see this fancy pottery and the fancy objects, and I think, oh, this must be like an advanced stratified society, but not. So far, what we have seen is and I'll explain this a little bit more later, is that they were egalitarian, they were not stratified. But then in the next period, next one, please. What we see is that Puerto Rico tends to kind of divide in two sections, cultural sections. On the western side is what we call Ostionan. On the eastern side is Helenan. And Tibes is more or less in the middle. It's right there, in that place. You can see it there with a star there. And this is after 600. So at the beginning of this period, you can still see a little bit of the saladoid, of the early nicely painted pottery and so on. They're not as decorated as before, but you can see the connection there basically in the first half. Next one. And this is for the western side of Puerto Rico. You see they're still using some kind of paint or slip red. They still have on the left. This is on the left. They still have some forms that are a little bit complicated but as before. But then when you get to the second part of this period, which is on the right, things start getting a little bit crummy. This is not that bad, okay? But when you get, let's go to the next slide, to the eastern side of Puerto Rico, here's where things actually go. If you go to the next slide. Here's where the pottery actually, there's a truncation basically, what you have with the fancy pottery, and then it wasn't getting that fancy anymore, but they still have similar types of, they still have some craftsmanship there. We get to this pottery that has no slip, no paint, just incisions, and those incisions don't even look they're like the vertical incisions along the edge of the mouth of the pots. That's the most common characteristic of this period. You cannot find this in earlier periods. There's a disconnection here, big time. Look at the shape of the vessels now; they're more rounded. They don't have these sharp changes of angles, as I mentioned before. These are people that know how to make pottery, but these are not people that really want to show off, if you will, their pottery in a way. And there's some vessels that are nice, but we cannot see the connection between this and what we saw earlier. And this is one of the dilemmas of Puerto Rican archaeology, is what happened here that we see this disconnection to a certain point. Okay, and you can see on the bottom left, and I apologize for that photo, didn't come out too well. But you can see the different shapes, and there's compared to the saladoids, they're pretty simplistic in a way. And I'm not saying that it's easy to make, because I tried making pottery, I'm terrible at it. But it's not what we saw before. It is at this time also. Next slide. Well, we see this basically impoverishment of the pottery. We see the development of ceremonial center, well, ball courts and plazas, and then in the case of Tibes, we see a ceremonial center. A ball court is a rectangular structure that is actually that the limits are determined by rocks. A plaza is when it's rectangular, quadrangular, or round. We call those plazas. Why we call the long ones ball courts is because to play the ball game you need two sides, almost like football, basketball. You need those two sides. If you look at the map of Tibes on the left, on the lower left corner, you can see that says number 3 there. That's a ball court, what we call a ball court there. Number 6 is in the middle, right in the middle. The quadrangular plaza is called a plaza. Yeah. Also, Tibes, well, we'll talk about Tibes a little bit later in more detail. But because of the development of these ball courts and plazas and its relationship with what the Spanish saw when they arrived, that they saw chiefdoms, and the chiefdoms have ball courts and plazas, people tend to think that when you find the ceremonial centers, we have stratification. And another reason why is also because to build those plazas and ball courts, it looks simple because they're small stones. No, you have to level the soils here. Actually, they move a lot of dirt in Tibes. So people think because of the amount of labor involved, there must have been some leadership involved in this too. So that's another reason why people start relate this kind of sites with social stratification. In addition, on the right side is a simple petroglyph. There's better, I should have chosen another one, but the petroglyphs in rock art seems to have started around this time. It might have started earlier, but it's during this time that it became more popular. And we have them here at the not too many. We have about 14, I think. But there's some of them. So rock art is developing here too. Something that is that wasn't present during the Saladoid that much. Next one. In the next period, which is the final period before Europeans arrived, actually these are the people that the Spanish encountered in Puerto Rico when they arrived. We call them archaeologically Chicanostionoid. Many people call them Taino, but Taino can be anything that is in the Great Antilles. Chicanostionoid is referring to Puerto Rico only in a way. And you can see the quality and craftsmanship of the pottery kind of got a little bit better, right? Oh, sorry, my computer went to sleep.
Antonio, we can still hear and see you.
Yeah, I couldn't see the slide. So.
Oh, okay.
Thank you. I don't know. I should move my cursor once in a while. But again, the majority of the decoration is plastic. It's incisions, modeling. It is said that it's plastic because you can change its shape, but they didn't use paints. You can find some slip, which is a cover, like a clay that covers the colorful clay that covers the surface of the pots. But most of the times they're bare like this. But at least the craftsmanship increased here. It's better than before. Okay. Next one. And then you get into the real fancy things at this time too. Like a big religious representations, like on the right side that we tend to call semi. We have the seat on the bottom right, dugos, and then you have these stones, very very nice stones, objects. The round ones, actually the two that look small like wedding rings, they're not wedding rings, and they're probably like 1.5 to 2 feet in diameter. They're huge, okay, and heavy. But there's a slender one on the top of them, and then there's this monoxyllic axe. It's an axe made of everything is made of one piece of stone, which shows you a little bit of the craftsmanship. They're not very common. I mean, they're not extremely uncommon, but I've never found one of these. In my life. Maybe I think I found a fragment of one stone collar or ring, but nothing serious like this. Let's go to the next slide. This time also we have Volcors and plazas, and this is the Ceremonial Center of Caguana in central Mexico, in Utuado. And you can see here, things got bigger, not only in terms of space, but we are dealing with huge pieces of stones, of rocks. In the bottom right, where you see the couple there, those are slabs taken from the hills that you can see in the other photo on top of it. The surrounding hills, they're limestone, and you can tell that they had to go and quarry them and bring them in here, because look how big those pieces are. Limestone is fragile. If they're collecting it from basically pieces that came down from the rolling down from the hills or something, that you will find only small pieces. You will never find pieces this big, because once they fall, they crack easily. So you can tell that these people put a lot of labor here. Of course, they have to level the surface of these areas too. And this is in a slope, so they have to cut the slope in many places. If you look at the map on the left, you can see a similar pattern as in Tibes. You have a quadrangular plaza in the middle, like we saw before, and then we have a big ball court with one that has B, the letter B, a big ball court there, and then they're surrounded by smaller structures around it, and we're going to see that with Tibes in a minute too. So they have a similar canon of distribution of space here. And then, of course, the most elaborate petroglyphs everywhere in the Caribbean are basically these ones here that you're seeing here. There's some that came up in the past 6 years, I think, in another site near Tibes. They're very similar to these. And there's some sophisticated ones in the Lesser Antilles, closer to the continent. But as a Caribbean, and those the ones in the Lesser Antilles, they're in huge boulders or the sides of mountains. These are basically in a setting that is constructed. It's not natural, basically. But you can see how elaborate they are there, and there's different theories on what these petroglyphs mean or rock art means. But they're beautiful, actually. There's as a Puerto Rican, you can see some of these images anywhere in Puerto Rico, in T-shirts, tattoos, whatever, you name it, in belts and everything. So they're very popular in Puerto Rico. Next one. So summarizing here, I'm going to add a little bit more information. The Saladoids, we said that they were more or less egalitarian. This is the traditional perspective, okay? They were tropical forest groups because they came from the tropics. They seem to have been tribal, non-stratified. I'm going to add a couple of things here. They tend to be in relatively large villages, big houses, as I mentioned before, surrounding a central plaza, sometimes semicircle, sometimes or semicircular or circular, many times next to rivers and so on. Later on comes the Hellenic Osteonoid, and here I'm focusing on the chronology that is related to Tibes. You see the ceremonial center is it's not like the one that we just saw, the late one, but it's still a ceremonial center that we tend to kind of relate to chiefdoms. And actually, what is when we look at this kind of constructions in archaeology, because of the labor and the planning, we think that there should be some kind of leadership. But also, we extend that to say that these are emerging chiefs that are probably trying to justify their existence as chiefs. So the one way of doing that is having control over the ideology. And the ideology can be the religious ideology. And then in building plazas and ball courts where they can do both, like play a ball game, which is more than just a game, have some significance, other significance to these people, to be in a plaza all dancing together, can relate that. And it's more or less like kings in Europe used to use God. I'm here because God put me here. Justifying their existence as chiefs is by manipulating the ideology. Many of these sites of this period are small. The pottery you saw that went down in quality, or at least in terms of aesthetics. It wasn't as good as before or after. But a lot of the sites are small. There's some big ones, but you see this big distribution of sites with this simple ceramic and basically people living in homesteads, or farmstead, if you will. And it seems that they were coming together to the ceremonial center once in a while. Then Tibes does not have any Chican osteoid, okay? So, but a Chican osteoid period in eastern Puerto Rico sees a little bit of a better development on the pottery. Houses seem to be smaller too. The Elena osteoid, the houses were smaller, like for single family, not these huge multi-family houses. The Chican osteoid had the same thing. Basically, it's very similar to Chican osteoid, but the pottery is better, and some of the sites are bigger in this period of time. And there's more population in general. Okay. Let's go now to Tibes. So Tibes is in southern Puerto Rico, in the area of Ponce. I hope there's some Ponceños here in the audience. If you look at the map on the right, it's more or less where that triangle is. And it is a key position here because it's in the foothills. Puerto Rico has the coastal plains, then has foothills, and then have the central mountain ranges. So Tibes is right in the foothills between the coastal plains that you can see a little bit on the right corner, lower corner, and the mountains. And these spaces, when you have differences, like you are between two different zones, in many cultures is a key place because they're liminal spaces. You're not here nor there. You're in both, and you're in neither one in a way. So they're liminal spaces that can have in many cases can have some religious significance in many cultures. Okay, so actually in the Christian way, Jesus is kind of in that liminal space. He was God, but he for Christians, but he was person too, so he was he was a special thing. So similar thing of interpretation can be done in places like that. And this is common in many cultures around the world. Okay, that you're not here and there. When people are in trance, they're in trance is a liminal space because they're not here and they're not there. They're consulting this supernatural, but they're in the natural world, but they're not in either one. And those are very, very dangerous places sometimes too, but for ceremonies and so on, that's the place that you want. Next one. It's kind of weird because normally I ask people if they have questions, but virtually we cannot do it. This is what you can see when you go to Tibes. You see some of the ball courts and plaza. My students from the beginning kept saying that it looked like a golf course, because they kept the grass really short and everything. It looked pretty good. And if you were walking towards it, you could see mostly the plaza more than the stones. It has a central plaza, as I mentioned before, number 6, surrounded by other structures. Number 3 is a ball court, but the number 7 is a unique structure in all the Caribbean. We call them star-shaped plaza. And it's a plaza that it was formed by triangles there. So most of them are kind of destroyed or buried, and you cannot see it. But it's almost like a rising sun. Some people say that you could see, but we don't know exactly what that means. But then if you look at 9 up north, up top, number 8 on the right, 5 under 8, 2, 4, 1, and those smaller structures. It follows similar pattern as we saw in Caguana in the later period ball court, that the central area is surrounded by what we think is ball courts. So you can see that's the same canons of use of space here. But what we're seeing here is the late Tibes. Tibes has 2 main general periods: this late one and the Saladoid one. Okay. And it's hard to get to the Saladoid sometimes because of all the structures, and they move a lot of dirt here. But we have found some areas that are pretty good, and we have really good dates. Next one. Just really quick, I'm going through this. Was discovered in 1974 after a hurricane or a tropical storm. The early excavators from the Sociedad Guainía, I don't have the name there, I thought I put it. They found these 2 periods I just mentioned, the early Saladoid and then the Elena osteoid late. Interesting enough, Well, they found 9 structures too, but interesting enough, they found 2 clusters of burials that you can see there. Actually, they found another one, but it's not, they found only like 3 or 4 burials, so we don't know exactly. And both of them were under the 2 largest structures, the 2 that we can, under the main plaza, they found, I think, close or more than 100 burials, and they didn't excavate the whole plaza, okay? And then there's some burials under the main bulkhead too. All the burials there belong to the Saladoid. They found very few later burials dispersed around the site, never inside of one of the structures. Actually, it was more related to the trash middens or the trash areas next to the bulkhead, to the structures that they were buried. So the few, and I'm talking, I probably want to say less than 15 of them, but could be a little bit more. They found it dispersed in the site, but the early period buried their people in the middle of the plaza, of the main structures. But sorry, keep in mind that those structures were not there when those people were buried in the middle of the site. The 2 clusters belong to the early period. The structures belong to the later period. I hope this is making sense. We'll get back to that later, okay? But remember that the burials from the middle of the plaza tend to be early, okay? Because we're going to get back to it later. Next one. Okay, so I have this research, and my research questions are, number 1, what are the processes involved in the development of social stratification? And number 2, under what conditions this social stratification developed? One thing is how it happened, but it's why it happened in a way, both of them. And then one thing that I wanted to choose is my research, my unit of analysis. And my unit of, next one, thank you, is the household. Why the household? I was hoping, because if this is the idea that ceremonial centers are related to social stratification, is that site is the seat of a chief or a cacique. You know, the idea is like in many places, if you go to Mexico, when you see the Mayas and whatever, they are living in the area where the religious structures are, because that's what they're controlling, you know, to state that they're divine in a way that they were chosen by the gods and so on. So people relate these ceremonial centers as the seat of powers too. So I was hoping to excavate site areas where you could see the Saladoid houses, or the Saladoid household in general, can be the trash or whatever, and then look through time, coming from bottom to top, look what were the changes that happened that led to the development of social stratification. So I wanted to excavate houses, because houses tells me a lot. If there's one family that is getting more fancy stuff, or it's getting more power, you expect that those houses are they're going to start showing more fancy stuff through time. And also because many leaderships, they are in charge of throwing big parties, like feasting. You expect to start finding pots are bigger than in other houses, because they're the ones throwing all this, you know, they're cooking a lot for the feasting and so on. And you might have bigger houses because maybe or increasing size of houses, because when you get more powerful, you start having servants or even slaves sometimes, or you have more than one wife if you're the chief. So you may expect the houses get bigger too. And I was hoping to start seeing that transition through the households, because the households would have told me a lot of these things, you know. And then those are this kind of, I should have changed it. Okay, and these are the things archaeologists look for. You know, the key, these small things sometimes in a way, or details that we need to see to start talking about how these people actually live. It is a painstaking process, okay, because it's not only excavating and look, oh, is there a big house? You have to do a lot of lab work to determine this thing sometimes. So it's not that easy. So next one. Next slide. Oh, okay. So I'm looking for houses. How in the world I find houses in this site, right? Well, I thought I know where the structures are. I know where many of the burials are, or where we are. I thought if I find the trash areas of these houses, I probably can figure out where the house is more or less, And and here let me put. I'm going to change hats a little bit here. I was mentioning this in the talk to the student this afternoon. The first principle or ethical principle of the Code of Ethics of the Society for American Archaeology is not, research or finding things or anything. It is to protect the archaeological record, and we have to protect them from looters, from animals, from hurricanes and other things, but also from archaeologists. If we're going to dig a site and our code of ethics is saying you have to protect the site, you better have a good idea, or a good reason to excavate, because we destroy the archaeological record when we excavate. So I always, every time I work in a site, I try to go small, try to see how I can find information that can tell me where in this whole site I can find the answers I want to my questions. So I'm looking for houses here. I could have started digging in many places until I found the house. But I decided to do basically a very small project of shovel pits. And shovel pits, you can see it on the left picture there. They're using basically actually, how they call those, post hole diggers? I think they call them. And it's like, they have like two shovels that you basically create a cylindrical hole. We screen all that soils, and you can see the screen on the right side of the woman that is actually a student that is digging. And then if you go to the other side to the map, that map is showing the concentration of pottery in this case. In this case, it's showing the concentration of pots. And all those areas that you can see that have a lot of contour lines, those are probably trash middens. Because it's like, again, like the city dump, if you're in a city dump, you find a lot of stuff, right? So we find high concentrations, so that we think those are the trash middens. The problem is that we don't know if they're trash middens from households or from ceremonies or from, I don't know, a picnic or whatever. So we had to excavate small excavation units like you're seeing in the middle to have an idea of what kind of trash we have there, but also give us an idea in terms of time. Are we talking about late or early period here? So that's why we started small. And here's where I'm showing some of the techniques and methods that we used. Next slide. We also use some kind of Star Trek or Star Wars technology. Or there's three of them shown here. If you go to the left top photo on the corner, that's a ground penetrating radar. It works like radar. It basically sends some waves into the ground. They bounce and you can record things. The two rectangles to its right is showing slices of what the radar saw. On the left is from 10 to 30 centimeters deep. On the right is 30 to 50 centimeters deep also. And if you look at the kind of the top right half of the picture on the left, that one. You can see the ends of two stone rows on the right top corner. Yeah, you can see that there's the orange colors are stone rows from one of the structures that that you could see in the map. I'm pointing this out because if you see that the one that was the line in the middle, orange, yeah, that one. The other side of the ball cord is close to the corner that is orange there on the right. No, in the same picture. There. So there you have the end. But look at between the two ends of the stone rows, there's something in between. There's a dot in between, right in the middle. We excavated that, and we're going to. So this is the entrance of one of the ball cords, and in the middle of the entrance, there's something buried, and I will show you later what we found there. The bottom left, we have magnetometry, which is basically a glorified metal detector. But we're looking for things that were burned. In this case, we're looking for fireplaces, and other things that and we didn't find a fire hearth, but we found other things with this too. On the right we have resistivity, which is an electrical current going underground, and if you look at the very colorful image on the right side, top right side, that was made with resistivity. And in that case, we found trails. Actually, we were able to find some trails because the ground of the trails were harder than the surrounding ground, and the electricity showed more resistance with the trails than in the surrounding areas. So we were able to detect some of the trails. The dark rectangle there, or kind of triangle in that image is in the colorful one. That's the corner of one of the main plaza of the middle. But anyway, moving on to the next one. And here's some of the results that we have been doing with excavations. Could you go back? Yeah, that one. On the top picture, those two rocks are the ones that were in the middle of the entrance of the ball court. Those two rocks are natural rocks. They have weird shape. One of them especially is a very strange rock. They're natural rocks, no changes, but they're not supposed to be there. Geologically, they were buried there for some reason. We don't know why, but we know that the Mayas had some markers buried on their ball courts too. So we don't know exactly if it's the same thing, but this is what we call a cache or an offering, because more like a cache that they bury them there for some reason. But in some societies, rocks are like, for example, the grandfather rocks here in North America and other places. Rocks are considered sacred sometimes too. So. Then in the bottom picture, what goes to this northern central part of the site, we found one of the earliest deposits. That is a saladoid deposit. This is early phase, the early stage. Okay, and we have a early date for that. That's a shell medium, by the way. You can see the shell there. Tibes is about 10 kilometers from the coast, so they have to hold these things, a long way. Next one. I'm going to go through this really quick because this is, and then close to the entrance of the main plaza on this, that's pointed down there, we found a big pit, a huge pit, where we found a lot of rocks, but a big, huge rock on the bottom. But also we found some fancy objects, like the one that is on the right. Oh yeah, I'm sorry, I'm talking about the top one. Then in the bottom picture, we excavated an area that was relatively flat, artificially flat, and we found that they used a lot of shells and other objects. And you can see them on the walls of the excavations. You can see things sticking out. Those are ceramic, stone artifacts, shells. The pipes are for the irrigation of the park, okay? But the rest is archaeological. Next one. Oh, this is another of the fancy pots that we found close to the entrance of the main plaza. And we have never found anything like this. And actually, this looks later than usual. On the western side of the plaza, we excavated a couple areas. This is one. I'll show you the other one later, where we found a lot of post holes and trash pits. We call them trash pits because we don't have any better term. We don't know what they bury there sometimes. But the ones that tend to be actually that don't have no filling, the circles and basically circular or oval figures, those are mostly post holes. So there was a structure there. But then there was also some pits that they bury things, and we don't know exactly. Probably it was something with perishable materials too. Next one. There's one of the posts, actually, if you see the arrow and go down a little bit towards the right, there's a lot of charcoal in the step there. That's a chunk of the post that is carbonized. It seems that they burned that post, and when they were trying to pull it out, they burned the bottom part. It broke there and they left it there. So but anyway, next one. Also, we did faunal remains. We studied the animal bones, and the three biggies here are. Can you go next one? Guinea pig, which is from South America. Rice rats and spiny rats are also from South America. Sometimes you can find them in the Lesser Antilles, but way south. And we just found maybe 2 or 3 guinea pigs, pieces, not the whole thing, and also bones of rice rats and spiny, like one individual each. Nothing special. But these are exotic animals, so they're not from the islands, or they're being brought here. And the interesting thing is that guinea pigs, they reproduce like rabbits. So you put them together, you get tons of them, you know. But the fact that they have only 1 or 2, that means that they are getting them from somebody that is controlling their reproduction and their distribution. So so it becomes like a commodity in a way, because those things reproduce so easily anyway. Next one. We study also botanical remains, and keep in mind that all this is trying to figure out stratification, okay? But can you click one more time? The biggie here is cohoba. Cohoba is a tree from South America that is in the Caribbean now too, but was brought by the indigenous people. But they use cohoba, the seeds, they ground them and mix them with tobacco and other things, and they will use it for their ceremonies. They will inhale it, and it's a hallucinogenic, right? Yeah. It makes you, it gets you high, and they start contacting. They use it to contact the supernatural. Basically, it brings you to a state where you start, basically, to take you to that liminal space I mentioned before, to a space that they're in the supernatural, but they're in this world too. It's a boundary between both, and they use it according to the Spanish in later times. They use them to contact the supernatural, the ancestors, to consult with the spirits, and so on. Okay, next one. We did studies of stones, nothing special. Actually, you can find better artifacts in other places of Tibet, in other sites than in Tibes. Next one. We did, this is very interesting. Some people from students and professor of Ball State University in Indiana, they study these stones in the structures and compare these stones with the ones in the river that is next door, because probably the stones came from the river. And they found out that all of the stones, surprise, came from the river, but one. Next one. Calcareous sandstone. Next one. This is what they look like. You see, these yellowish stones. They're not. I don't know why they're bringing them here. They can be heavy. We found some chunks are big. The closest source, and it's not the source that they use for the stones. At least for 1 or 2 of them, it's like 2 kilometers, and you have to go over a hill. So they're bringing them here. Many of the petroglyphs. Next one. Are made in these stones. Many of these stones, and this is just one sample of the petroglyphs. Of these 7, I think, petroglyphs here, 5 were made of this stone. So they're bringing the stones here, and if you see the ones that are on the right top, the half sun, the face, and then the half face on the other. If you see those 3, they were broken and they were placed on the sidewalk here, on the calzada, if you will, the cobblestones there. They put them. Is that they broke all petroglyphs and put them for a pavement, basically. There's a lot of questions. What did they do that for? And they look different than the other ones, but still they were made of that stone, and we don't know exactly where they're getting it from and what it means. That's one key thing that we have to deal with eventually. Next one. We did isotope analysis of human remains, looking for diet to see if there were some people who were eating better than others. We didn't find out anything. The only thing they found, and you can see on the left, on the graph on the left, the circular women and the diamonds are males. That the women tend to have more diverse, different levels of nutrition than the men. That tends to be more clustered, but sample is too small for this. It's not showing that, and even then, it shows that everybody's eating okay. So there's no people, at least with this sample, showing that there's some people eating better than others. basically. Next one. So, after all these studies, basically, we found out that we had a big problem because we were looking to try to study stratification, but we couldn't find stratification. So the main thing here, what is the big problem? Our assumptions. We assumed that there was stratification, and you know what happens when you assume, right? And this is a big thing. In Puerto Rico, Hispaniola, and Cuba, everybody knows that the Taínos are organized in chiefdoms. Well, in Puerto Rico, at least in Tibes, there's no evidence for that whatsoever. And actually, if you consider that at least even Cuba, but more Hispaniola or Dominican Republic and Puerto Rico, over 100 years of archaeological work at different levels and at different degrees and so on, but nobody has found the burial or house or any big evidence that you say, yeah, there's a chief. If there was a big chief in these islands, as people think, or we assume, or the Spanish mention, we should have found them by now. We have at least one, you know, and Puerto Rico especially, because Puerto Rico has laws that specify that before any construction is done, they have to survey the site of the construction site before doing anything to see if there's an archaeological site, and if there's one, they have to dig part of it. And so we have done a lot of projects in Puerto Rico, and nobody can tell me exactly that they have found either the house of a chief or anything like that, you know. Yeah. So one big problem that we have in Puerto Rico and in the Caribbean is that we are assuming all the time that we have chiefdoms when we don't cannot prove it empirically, and that's a big problem. So there's no strong evidence of social differentiation. Next one. Yeah, we found the guinea pigs and things like that, but that happens even in egalitarian societies where they want to bring something special for the supernatural. Next one. So it's not a clear cut. There's very few high status markers. Actually, you see them more in the later period of the Chicanostian or Taino, but not in the Tibes side. You don't find them. That is earlier. Next one. So, okay, so where's the chief? I think there's no chief, but the big question is in the next one. Then, if it's not chiefdom, what is the meaning and function of Tibes? Why did they build Tibes? You know, why they create this ceremonial center? We have a village here, you know, and everything, and suddenly, boom, they build the ceremonial center. It doesn't look like it was occupied. We have found structures, but they don't look domestic. That's the issue here. But anyway, why did they do all this? Sorry, my computer kicked. Okay, Michael. Yeah, there we go. So next one. Next slide. Okay. Oh, wow, this is coming all at once. Why? Oh, this should be... Can you go back? Okay, there it is. Thank you. No, go back. One more. Okay, do one move forward. There, leave it there. Okay, until we start excavating this area here on the... if you're looking at the map, it's called the OP19 area, west of the... main plaza. We found what we thought was a cooking area because we found a lot of shells and food and bones and burned things, you know, and all that was found more towards the lower part of the big excavated area that you see there. If you look to the bottom of that excavation, you can see there's a lot of white spots. Those are shells and bones and all that stuff. Okay, but we expanded this, and now you can do the next one. Because we wanted to find the cooking area. We remember we were looking for houses. So we were excited, but turned out that I don't think it's a house anymore. So we started finding similar things that we found in the other area I mentioned before, post holes with pits. You know, we don't know exactly what they were doing with those pits. There's a burn area towards the left side on the top area that is kind of dotted. Like the floor was burned. But we kept digging down because you always try to make sure that there's nothing else below what the area that you excavated first. So we dug deeper. Next slide. we found this, and here I'm showing this because I think this will help explain what is Tibes. If it wasn't the seat of power or a ceremonial center directed by a chief, then what it is. We started by findings really deep. This is like, I don't know, probably like a meter under the post holes that you saw before. You start up on the top part of the drawing, you see those 3 rocks there, and you can see them on the right in the photo. You can click one more, Marianne, one more time. We excavated that, and you see those rocks there? Next one. Boy, I saw that, it's like, wait a minute. And then some visit, the Tibes is an archaeological park, so I was explaining to the visitors, like, what in the world have put those rocks standing up on their sides? I throw that rock 100 times, into the ground, it will fall flat, How come we have this rock standing on its side? There's no evidence that these rocks are connected with the human activity on top. We will have seen it when we excavate. We can say they made a hole and put those rocks there. There's no evidence whatsoever, okay? So what else could have put those rocks in that position? The only thing is a big flood that is coming with mud and other things, and then it stops suddenly where the rocks fall on their edges, and because all the mud is falling at the same time, it's kept in place standing on their edges, which is not a natural position if these rocks were just thrown, and I hope this is making sense. If not, write it down and we'll talk about it later. So this is showing that there might have been a kind of a high energy to a certain level. These are boulders of 10 centimeters, 20. But then we kept excavating the side, and then we started finding things on the bottom, on the other side of the excavations. Can you click one more time? We found a human leg. Down there, again, there's no pit. This was not part of a burial. We found pottery. Can you click one more time? Related with the human leg. The human leg are the first images on top. We found a bunch of adult teeth, and we found a group of bones that I thought at first it was of one of the rodents, hutillas or guinea pigs, but then we determined that it seemed to have been a baby, a prenatal baby actually. And all this was on the bottom part of this. So this was part of the flood too. So we have evidence here, but flood. They don't seem to have been alive when the flood came, because floods do not actually cut people's limbs like that. It's very rare, extremely rare. It has to be really. So it seems that these were in burials, and actually in probably recent burials, because the leg was in its position, anatomical position, meaning that it still had some ligaments. So it seems to have been kind of a little bit fresh at the time of the flood. Okay, next one. Then when I look at I took samples, charcoal sample for dating to get dates, and I found that the dates that all the samples that came from the floor that we saw with the post holes and everything are the 5 lines that you're seeing of the dates on the right side. The one on the extreme left side comes from close to a charcoal that we found close to the leg. Let me rephrase this. The lines that are on the right side, the 5 lines, those are radiocarbon dates for the cultural layer that we excavated on top. But then one charcoal sample was able to obtain from the leg and the bone and the teeth and all that. Basically, it's on the left here, and you can see the disconnection here. The flood happened earlier than the structures and other cultural materials that we saw on top. Next one. In another part of the site, and I'm stopping with the evidence here, we have more evidence. We found another pot, and you can see on the rock there. If you look on the left side of the picture towards the top, you can see that the cultural layer where the archaeological materials are right there on a high level. But just going down the wall, there's nothing else. But then you find this pot. Again, it's the flood that deposited this pot in this. So we have plenty of evidence of a big flood. Next one. We're almost done here, I think. But now, the thing to see, okay, when did the flood happen? How does all this related? This is going to, I hope it's not very confusing for you. But the blue dots here are from the burials, from the excavations of the early excavation that recovered more than 100 burials. Those are the dots that you're seeing here in blue. The orange ones are the ones that come from my excavations. Great. Okay, we see. Oh, by the way, time is in the y-axis, so time is going from bottom to top. Okay. Yeah, I know it's confusing, but I couldn't put the time on the bottom for some reason. Excel wouldn't cooperate. But if you look at the blue one, you can see all those dots. Slowly through time. That's a sign of a normal population where every other year somebody dies. Okay, so you see it's climbing, but it's climbing slowly. But when can you do the next one, Marianne? Next slide. When you put the date for the flood that I got in that from that unit with the leg, look where most of the burials are under the lower range of this flood. You find like 4 dots later on, but we know that they were burying people later on too. Okay. This is showing to me that we have a community here of a village where people are having a mortality that is natural. Every other year, somebody's dying, and slowly, it's not the slope of the through time is changing very, very slow. And then suddenly there's a flood and they stop. That tells me that probably people are not living in the site after that. This was a big event that people abandoned the site. And some of them were buried later there, but not too many. And it's telling me, and we know that the structures were buried. The structures were built after that period too. We have dates for the structures too, so we know the structures were built. So I think what happened here, there's a correlation between the flood being a big disaster, and as we're going to see in a minute, probably not only in Tibes, that actually made people abandon here, where people probably died, and then the site was abandoned. It was turned into a ceremonial center. Okay, so Tibes is not now the seat of a powerful chiefdom. Tibes is now, if this is true, is now a memorial site to the ancestors. Okay, a couple of more pieces of evidence. Next one. One of my students did a study on corals. And if you go from left to right on the lower axis, it's going from early to late. She found out that corals, if you look at the early part, you start increasing. There's a lump there, and keep in mind that we didn't excavate everywhere, and we see like a lump here, and suddenly there's nothing. And you see a little bit coming there, and then it's not until basically it's from 970 or something like that. It's almost like 200 years later, you see coral again. Well, she started studying coral. Actually, she's a marine biologist, and she found out that category 4 and 5 hurricanes, category 4 and 5, can destroy coral reefs. She's doing this more for her dissertation, and she found out that in Tibes, at the beginning, you can see a lot of coral fish and coral reef fish and coral reef resources. And suddenly, during this period where you can hardly find coral, they're diversifying. They're going to the mangroves. They're going to the shallow waters. They're trying to get food from whenever they can find, until little by little coral starts growing up again. Okay, so this is the first evidence that she brought to me. It's like, oh my gosh, it might have been like a big flood. And next one. Oh, okay, I'm sorry, I have it there. Next one. And this self-explanatory graph, right? I'm kidding. It's not self-explanatory. This is a study was done in Vieques, which is a small island off the coast of Puerto Rico, southeast. And they did basically this. They did some drillings trying to get soil samples. And what they were trying to do they did it in a pond close to the coast, because what they wanted to study is hurricanes. And when they do the samples, what they're looking for is a search. When the search of the hurricane comes in, it leaves a mark on the soils, like the different kind of grains and so on. So they can have these what we call cores, which are samples, deep samples, and they can basically see where they can see the marks from the hurricanes. And what is interesting, can you click one more time? The important thing is this is their data. This is the data is that top line, that graph. The lower two graphs are from other projects, okay? And can you click one more time? This is enhancing that part. That area that I'm enhancing here, and you can see it. This is from the publication. These are two researchers in Donnelly and I forgot the second name. But this is a time of intense landfalls, because this is not just a regular hurricane. These are intense. And you see the triangles. Can you click one more time? There's a couple of triangles. That one, triangles means that they have a radiocarbon date for that peak. So you see that peak there? That's the radiocarbon date. The one is AD 9226. Can you click one more time? This is the data we got from the flood in Tibes. It's almost identical. I'm not saying this is exactly the same hurricane. It could be, but it's telling me that there was hurricane activity at that time in the area around Puerto Rico, really close to Puerto Rico. And if click the next one, remember, hurricanes are not localized phenomena. Like when we see maps like this is Hurricane Maria that crossed through Puerto Rico, but in reality, click one more time. They're huge regional phenomena, that they can, and Maria was, I think it was category 4 or 5. I mean, it was amazing. Basically what I'm trying to say here, that what I'm thinking what's happening in Tibes is not that much development of social stratification. I think a lot of people died. Culture changed big time. And when I say a lot of people die, I'm talking about population collapse. When there's a population collapse, people are not only possibly starving because everything was destroyed. Imagine if today Puerto Rico had major problems with a hurricane like this. Imagine those times, where they didn't have all the resources that we have, and so have been worse. People might have died. I've been told that category 4 and 5 hurricanes, if you're middle of it, you cannot even breathe. You die, Not to mention that there's things flying over the place and you're going to die no matter what, There's no caves in that region. There's nothing. At this time, I have evidence already of many sites being abandoned at the same time, more or less between 800 and 900. We have the whole culture, as you said, in the ceramic, decreasing quality. But then you start seeing these structures developing and developing, they're building them on top of the ancestors where people were buried, and it is basically a memorial site that is happening. And one critique I have to my previous research and my colleague is that we are so sophisticated looking for the kings and the queens and the chiefdoms and so on, that we forget that people are human, and sure, if my ancestors died, and I mean, here are my ancestors, the people that lived there died and everything, and we bury them there. We want to make this like a memory. It's abandoned eventually, but it becomes like a memory of our ancestors, and then if they're in the other world, so they're part of the supernatural now. So we venerate them, or we do things for them, and it becomes a memorial site for those people. And I think a lot of the work that was done in Tibes later on is related with venerating these ancestors. I have a couple of other slides, but I'm going to stop now because I think it's getting too late, and I think I'm using up your kindness here. But basically, that's what I'm looking at. I have a lot of other things now. I don't have a smoking gun, as they say. And in archaeology, you never have a smoking gun. What you try to get is multiple lines of evidence to support your arguments. You can never have a chain of arguments, because if there's one argument that's weak, then you would lose. But if you have multiple lines of evidence, if one is weak, you still have the other multiple lines of evidence, and that's what I'm trying to do from now on. And I think I'll stop here.
Thank you, Dr. Curet, for that. Thank you, Dr. Curet, for that really interesting talk. If I could invite Representative Vargas to make a couple of comments, let me just share with you all the reason that I asked Ed to speak to us or to make some comments about Dr. Curet's presentation, because some years ago I was having a conversation with him about something completely different, and I mentioned my family history class, and he began to tell me about the research that he had done in combination, or the fact that he had participated in a National Geographic program and knew that there were Taínos in his family. So I invited him to speak to my class, and as a former history and social studies teacher, he had the students completely enwrapped, and I thought that this would be a way to kind of make a connection here to Hartford, right? And then we'll have some time for questions and answers. Thanks. Ed, the floor is yours.
Thank you very much, Mary Ann. I'm quite fascinated by this whole presentation that was made by Antonio regarding the history, the ancient history of the inhabitants of Puerto Rico. And so many questions have come to my mind. Were these transitions an evolution of the original people? The Salatoids became the Alaman Oscanoid, and the Alaman Oscanoid become the Chica Oscanoid, or was this due to infusions of other groups that came to inhabit the island? I'm not sure if there's any evidence showing one way or another, but the whole thing is very fascinating. I got interested, as my bio states, I was born in Brooklyn, New York, but my mother and father were both born on the island. My mother's father was from a town called Camuy.
Oh, yeah.
My mother's mother was from Atillo, and both these towns are in the northwestern corner of the island. And however, my father's father was also born in Atillo, so I've got a lot of constant. 3/4 of that comes from that area. But my father's mother was from a mountain town, Ay Bonito, Puerto Rico, so I got a little bit of that mountain there too. And I've been interested in my wife too, Sylvia. We're both Puerto Ricans. A little different because I was born in Brooklyn, but when I was about 11 years old, my family returned to Puerto Rico. So I went to high school in Puerto Rico. My first 3 years of my undergraduate work was at the University of Puerto Rico at the main campus in Rio Piedras, which is now part of San Juan. And I had an opportunity, of course, to also spend a couple of years in Central American countries, in Nicaragua, Honduras, Panama, working on a literacy campaign with indigenous populations, including the Kuna Indians of the San Blas Islands, which still have a pre-Columbian culture there. And when I returned to Puerto Rico, I found out that the University of Hartford was offering scholarships and the opportunity to become an educator in the Hartford public school system. So I became a transfer student at the University of Hartford. My wife's, her background is kind of like a mirror image of my background. She was born in Santurce, Puerto Rico, which is also part of San Juan now. And when she was about 7 years old, her family moved to Brooklyn, New York. So I guess we missed each other in the air. And but we reconnected. She had been 3 years at the Central Connecticut State University in New Britain, Connecticut, and also joined the same program as a senior transfer at the University of Hartford into this teacher corps training program, federally funded program. And we met there in our senior year, got married, and we both had an interest on this issue of our backgrounds. And so we know from our family history and from also conversations with other people about the different groups that settled on the island, the indigenous groups, later the European groups, and later the African groups, and how Puerto Ricans have a mixture of all these races. And when the National Geographic was doing a research on the Y chromosome, which is the male chromosome, which goes from father to father to father, and it's the lineage in that particular chromosome doesn't change, unless there's a mutation, or that's what I'm told anyway. I'm not an expert on genealogy or any of this, but I did send in a sample, a saliva sample, and I received an interesting letter from them, from a lady. This was back in 2006, so this would be 14 years ago, from Dr. Ana Oquendo Pavon, a medical doctor who was a co-administrator at the time of el Proyecto ADN, de Nombres Puertorriqueños, and a few other groups. And she mentioned the fact that there's something curious about my background on my Y chromosome was that they found that it was indigenous, and so she questioned whether or not, my family background was from Puerto Rico, because she said it's very rare. Usually it's found in the X, which is a mixture of the maternal and the paternal DNA, but usually they don't find somebody with a Y chromosome that goes back to a pure native male. And so she said it was very unique, and she wanted to learn more about it. She wanted to know how far back I could trace my family to Puerto Rico, which really was somewhere back into the mid 19th century, somewhere in the mid 1800s. So because she said this is very common in Mexico and among other native populations where you find the male Y chromosome, but they hadn't found it to that point. Maybe they have found it more recently, but at that point they hadn't found one on the male chromosome. So she thought it was kind of unique, and she was asking me if my family was from Mexico. And to my knowledge, no, we're not from Mexico. We're from Puerto Rico. But who knows? I know that during the Spanish Empire, there's a lot of movement of peoples, and more recently, I did my Ancestry.com, and so did my wife Sylvia. We were interested to find out how much Portuguese DNA there was in our blood. Of course, we found the Spanish blood. We found a little bit of European Jewish blood, North African blood, which makes sense since the Moors conquered Spain over there for 800 years. But I also found that I had a lot of native blood from the island, and that was a pretty high percentage of native blood from that. I believe it was something like 9%. And then I also found I had smaller percentages from Colombia, Venezuela, and the northern coast of South America. So this all has been fascinating to me. So, when I was listening to Antonio's presentation, I think it's really remarkable. I don't know if, I'm sure people have a lot of questions. I know I do. But I think that everyone should know something about their background. They should know what their history is, what their family history is, what their culture is. And I really thank Dr. Mahoney for inviting me to be part of this. I find this very exciting. And I know that the participants that are not panelists, but who are observing this panel discussion are probably very interested and have a lot of questions too. I'm very curious about this, and I know it has to do with the identity, our identity, and it's helped shape who we are today, and in ways that perhaps we don't even perceive. So I'll just leave it at there, because I've become a fan of this whole area of studies. I taught history. I taught American history mostly at the high school level. I did, but I am a student of world history, and I find all these things interesting. But there's nothing like history that touches on you, your relatives, the people that came before you, and of whose lineage you are a part of. That touches you in a much more personal way. Mm-hmm. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you, Representative Vargas. Everyone, we have some time for question and answers. I know you've all been very patient, and I'm going to open up the chat. So we set this event to last until 9 o'clock. and we're not actually sure whether WebEx in its infinite wisdom is going to boot us all out at 9 o'clock, but I'm happy to stay and run the recording and have a conversation as long as anybody's interested in hanging around. And if at 9 o'clock we all disappear, I'm sorry, it's the wonders of control of technology that you can't control. But let's see. So there is a question, Dr. Curet, from Alexis Ocasio, saying that 9 stone structures were restored. I think this is about Tibes. What happened to the other 3?
It is hard to tell what they mentioned, referred to when they're talking about 12 structures. This is the original excavators in the 1970s that they discovered this site and excavated. I haven't found any other big structure. There might be one more somewhere, but we're not sure. But I think they're referring to 3 small structures. One of them, 2 of them are like small retention walls to the river. Another one is a small circle of maybe 2 feet wide next to the plaza. So I think they're referring to those other 3. We don't know exactly what they were referring. They say that there were probably up to 12 structures, but I think they're referring to those because I couldn't find anything. It doesn't mean that there's something else, but and they excavated a lot more than me. So I've seen their collection is amazing. They have tons and tons of stuff. So they might have found it somewhere else, and I haven't touched those areas yet.
Thank you. So Millie Guzman Young asks whether the people of Tibes told their stories with hieroglyphics, and if so, have they been translated? And that you started answering her second question, which is it possible that there could have been stratification, but that much of it was washed away with the mudslides, tropical storms, hurricanes, tornadoes, whatever.
Yeah, that's a possibility, let's say, at the site of Tibes, but when you have the whole island has been excavated, in a way, I doubt it, Tibes, because we still find deposits from the late period, so we still have, maybe it's right, maybe the area where the elite is not, is the one that got eroded. But again, when you look at the whole, even at the whole Caribbean, nobody has found evidence of stratification. We assume it, and they mention it, and they talk about the chiefs and the caciques. And one thing about the word cacique means, and my colleague here, Jorge Esteves, can verify this. It means in Arawak means head of the house or owner of the house. So it almost sounds like a kinship type of terminology or category. So it's not necessarily a political one in a way, but even in other sites near the rivers, we find in other sites, actually, you can go anywhere in other site in Puerto Rico and you find better things that we found in Tibes. Even the ceramic doesn't look like they wanted to show differences. It's almost like when we were there, we're all the same, and we don't want to show our differences, but our similarities. But it is a possibility always, yeah, definitely. But when you consider that there's so many sites excavated throughout the island, and nobody has found anything, it gets suspicious.
Thank you. And I should note for everyone who's attending this from New Britain, we're joined by Dr. Curet from Washington, D.C. We're joined by a friend and colleague of his in Puerto Rico. We're joined by one of his relatives from who's in California, and we're also joined by an archaeologist from Brazil named Gerlane Araújo, who sends the following question. If I'm not mistaken, Professor Curet spoke of not finding houses in Tibes. So the lack of social stratification cannot be due to the place being used for symbolic rituals of worship to ancestors and the forces of nature, such as hurricanes. He suggests that it's due to many cultures in these in these rituals promoting a feeling of greater equality among members. Entendi, Jadune? Okay.
You're translating?
No, I was saying it in English. No, he can understand if you say it in Portuguese. I mean in English. So it's more a comment. So he's wondering if he may not have fully understood what you said, because I think he understood you to say that there were no houses, but you did find houses.
I found structures, and I found structures, but I depends what you mean by houses. I found structures, but there might have been one, maybe some of them might have been ceremonial structure, like where they did some ceremonies. We're not sure, but also it could be also if this site is a vacant site that people come here for festivals and other things like that, they might have had structures where people could stay and spend the nights there. So I guess I'm making I'm differentiating between households, like a house where people live permanently, to places where people stay just for the time that they're having the festival, or maybe ceremonial structures, basically. So, and it's really difficult to distinguish at least the where people are staying for the festival versus houses, because they're eating the same thing, they're doing the same things in the same places, and they might look different. I mean, they're similar, but they were used in different times. Is this making sense? Am I? Did he get it, or
yeah, he got it. He got it. No.
Did I address his question?
I think so. Respondeu a pergunta. Yeah, he's nodding. I can see him nodding. So, Helena, you had your hand up. Would you unmute yourself? Is this Helena Torres Diaz? Sometimes it takes a little bit of time to do that.
Raise your hand. Say yes, say no. Lord. Where's my camera, though? Right here.
So, Helena, can you hear me? Hi, Millie.
Hi.
Oh, sorry. She said she raised his hand. She raised her hand by accident. I don't see anything else in the chat. Nobody else. I thought this was really interesting, and given how much new research Dr. Curet and others are engaged in, and how important these issues are to the history of the Caribbean, and given that we have a new public law that requires, among other topics, Latino and Puerto Rican and Latino history to be offered in Connecticut classrooms, I think it is really important that we have access to scholars like Dr. Curet, who can help inform us as to what ought to be being presented. Representative Vargas has his hand up.
Yes, I was wondering, because I had been thinking about the, the different phases of these different cultures that developed, and I had been asking myself, I don't know if Dr. Curet has an opinion on it. Was this, in fact, or is there any evidence that these changes were just a normal development over the centuries, or was this these changes in culture traced back to any influxes of different migrations?
Yeah, actually, you mentioned this in your earlier talk, and I think once the early people with colorful pottery and all that stuff, I think this is some kind of evolution. I don't know if they're adapting more and more to the island environment or something, but they how it's related. You can tell that it's changing from one to the other. You can find that the ancestry and how it goes through time is start changing differently, but it's maintaining the same taste, if you will, But it's after that when more or less when the flood happens, that it changed. The canons of pottery changed big time. After that. What I think is happening, we're seeing more influence from Hispaniola, like Western Puerto Rico, even before, was receiving some, and about that I don't know that much because the DNA, and I think my colleague sent me the two recent papers on DNAs from the Caribbean. They show that most of all the samples they have from Dominican Republic, Hispaniola, Puerto Rico, and Eastern Cuba, all genes are coming from South America, not from Central America and other things, but South America. So it seems that that something was brewing in Hispaniola that created different cultures, and they spread out and influence each other. So I think there is cultural interaction going on, but I don't understand it that well yet. Is this making sense?
Yes, it does. And now, when I was a young man, I said I moved to the island when I was 11 years old. And they seem to have a pretty simple story about who the indigenous people were that they used to tell us as young people in the school system. Right. In Puerto Rico, the story was that they had a simple religion where Huracan was the bad god, Yukiju was the good god. Right. That Yukiju lived in El Yunque up in the mountains, and that Huracan was the responsible one for the hurricanes. I don't know where they got all this story from, and if that holds up still today.
Right. Actually, Huracan is a Mayan word, and it's mentioned in the Chronicles. But that thing that was the bad one, like a bad spirit and everything. I don't know. I'm with you, and you know what? And now because I know more Native people, and I'm dealing with it hurts me because we make them simplistic. Those people we're misrepresenting the people that came before us. In a simplistic way with the bad and the good, they were very complex individuals like we are, and we're dehumanizing these people when we talk about them as a simple thing. So it's interesting that you're mentioning that, and yeah, a lot of it was Alegría, Ricardo Alegría. He wrote that book for kids in the late 50s, early 60s, and I never read it, but I looked through it, and and to be fair with him, we didn't know that much at that time either. But this was happening in the United States and other countries. They look at the past and simplify it. But you're right.
So we have a couple of more comments in the chat. So has the government of Puerto Rico or the United States or anywhere recognized any of these sites as sacred ground?
No, the government itself sees it as an archaeological site that because Puerto Rican identity since the 50s and 60s, and again with the Instituto de Cultura Puertorriqueña directed by Alegría, they talk about the Puerto Rican identity being the mix of races and cultures, African, indigenous, and European. The archaeological sites are seen as ancestors of the Puerto Rican culture. So it belongs to the people, and so it's like in Mexico, the state took over the Aztecs and the Mayas. But they don't recognize the Mayas that are living next to them, like they're still alive, and these are the ancestors of those Mayas, not of all the Mexicans, and that's an issue in Puerto Rico. So they recognize them as historical sites, that they're part of our culture, they're part of the ancestry of our culture, and yet they recognize that they were used as a ceremonial center, but don't treat them as something sacred in that way.
That might change. You never can tell.
Right, and as of today, I think we respect. A lot of us respect it, and try to be respectful with it. But
Can I ask something?
Yeah, go ahead, Millie.
I just wanted to know, people that are now getting the DNA tests and just seeing that they have Taino background, has there been like a surge in groups, organizations, people that are uniting with Taino, with Taino heritage, or have you seen any groups?
in the island?
Yeah.
Yeah, in the island there's several groups. And a big problem is happening in the island, and again, I'm not denying that there might be descendants, but it's like it's becoming like a fad in Puerto Rico. Everybody wants to be a Taino or something like that, and then so it's really hard. And there's some communities, especially in the west, like actually Pepino, San Sebastián de Pepino, and Las Marias, and especially the Marias, there were some Indieras, towns of Indians. Created by the Spanish. But because of the waters are a little bit kind of murky because everybody wants to be. But also, it gets a little bit more complicated because the Spanish brought indigenous people from other parts of the Caribbean. Actually, the Indians or the indigenous people from Mona ended up in the Indieras for a while because they were being bothered too much by pirates and things like that. So they came to the island, and those are one of the last communities that I could find evidence for in the chronicles and the documents. I haven't studied this really deep, but as much as I could find, I couldn't find that. That's one of the last original. But I bet there's families that have that. The thing is that I didn't find historically people talking about after a certain point that there were in communities of Indians, because I say that people mix too much at one point. But a lot of this is told by the Spanish government, so who knows if they knew what they were talking about.
Mm-hmm. But I would like to check my own DNA someday. And do you know any companies that you recommend?
Well, actually, Ed might be better than me, but if I don't know if Nat Geo is still doing that, Ed, but I think there'll be a more if they're still doing tests like that, I think it'll be better at Nat Geo, because some of these companies they're talking about probabilities, but I never seen one of those reports, but people end up thinking like, oh yeah, I'm this, when actually it's a percentage. There's some genes with 13 mutations that belong to the Caribbean. That's true, but I don't know how much. To be honest, I don't know that much about the quality of the work. But Ed seems that he knows a lot more than me. I can talk to a colleague if you want me to.
Okay, thank you.
Dr. Curet, we also had a question about how much damage Hurricane Maria did to Tibes.
Thank God, not much. Actually, I was able to get some funding from the Smithsonian to go and help. And when we got there, it was only falling trees and not a lot, but yeah. And that actually brought up some archaeological material to get out of context. The Corps of Engineers have been building, and actually I think that was almost finished by the time of the hurricane. Upriver, they were building a dam. So actually they built it. And the dam did its work. It didn't allow, there was no big flood, because in Tibes, when it rains really hard, water gets in. The main plaza is like a swimming pool, a shallow one. Well, it's not swimming, like a reflective pool, I guess. But and there's a lot of erosion. But thank God, I think it was the dam that saved it. And the winds turned out some trees, but nothing serious. Actually, the infrastructure of the museum, windows broken, water getting in, mold, and all that stuff, suffered more than the site itself.
Mm-hmm. Thank you. So, Helena comments that The new groups are Neo-Tainos using South American. So by any chance, do you know what has happened to the new indigenous archaeological site at Parque de los Delfines?
Yeah, who
That's
mentioned
from
that?
Helena. So Helena Diaz Torres is from Puerto Rico. She's a student at Central, but her father was a student with Dr. Hector Moya. So
Oh, okay.
I'm very excited about your research.
Unfortunately, I've never visited the park, and I never had the chance of going there during the excavations. This is, for those of you who don't know, and I think it's in Mayagüez, not in, I think it's the mountains of Mayagüez. It's in the mountain side of Mayagüez, and it's one of the few structures. It's a plaza, it's a big plaza that is found in Western Puerto Rico. Most of the structures, like bulkers and plazas, are basically east of Tibes, more or less. You hardly find any on the west, and it has rock art that has a lot of marine representations. Dolphin, I think there's a whale. They have the very it's rich in marine representations, and I haven't. They created a park, but I haven't been able to go there, so I don't know that much. I know the colleagues, I know the project, but I don't know that much about the site, unfortunately. And I don't know what they have done. I know that they finished the park, but they kept it closed. And there was a political, or I don't know what was, there was some issues on why they couldn't open it. But I don't know the details.
Anything else before I want to, so we have 9 minutes left according to my phone. And I want to thank Dr. Curet and Representative Vargas for their participation and their time and all the effort that they put into this. And, you're all welcome to stay and chat, but I did want to say thank you in case the technology decides that, well, we said we'd be finished at 9, so they're just going to shut the door on us. So I'm not sure what's going to happen. But thank you very, very much.
No, I want to thank you for this opportunity, and I apologize if the talk was too long, but I get excited sometimes,
It was perfect.
So, Helena says, thank you, Dr. Curet, for the update. Greatly appreciated.
Thank you.
So, anyway, anything else, anybody?
Thank you very much, Marianne. I really enjoyed it, and I appreciated your hospitality.